native hunter with me gazed in mingled fear and amazement. In support of Hickens's story, Cuthbert Burgoyne wrote a letter to Discovery in 1938, noting that he and his wife had seen something similar while coasting Portuguese East Africa known today as Mozambique in a Japanese cargo boat in 1927. We were sufficiently near to land to see objects clearly with a glass of 12 magnifications. There was a sloping beach with light bush above upon which several dozen baboons were hunting for and picking up shellfish of crabs, to judge by their movements. 2 pure white baboons were amongst them. These are very rare, but I had heard of them previously. As we watched, 2 little brown men walked together out of the bush and down amongst the baboons. They were certainly not any known monkey, and yet they must have been Akin or they would have disturbed the baboons. They were too far away to be seen in great detail, but these small human-like animals were probably between 4 and 5 feet tall, quite upright and graceful in figure. At the time I was thrilled, as they were quite evidently no beast of which I had heard or read. Another report comes from German Captain Ludwig Freiherr von Stein. Von Stein was ordered to conduct a survey of German colonies in what is now Cameroon in 1913. He heard stories of an enormous reptile called Mokelmbembe alleged to live in the jungles, and included a description in his official report. According to Ley, von Stein worded his report with utmost caution, knowing it might be seen as unbelievable. Nonetheless, von Stein thought the tales were credible. Trusted native guides had related the tales to him, and the stories were related to him by independent sources, yet featured many of the same details. Though von Stein's report was never formally published, Ley quoted von Stein as writing, "The animal is said to be of a brownish-gray color with a smooth skin. Its size is approximately that of an elephant, at least that of a hippopotamus. It is said to have a long and very flexible neck and only one tooth, but a very long one. Some say it is a horn. A few spoke about a long, muscular tail like that of an alligator. Canoes coming near it are said to be doomed. The animal is said to attack the vessels at once and to kill the crews, but without eating the bodies. The creature is said to live in the caves that have been washed out by the river in the clay of its shores at sharp bends. It is said to climb the shores even at daytime in search of food. Its diet is said to be entirely vegetable. This feature disagrees with a possible explanation as a myth. The preferred plant was shown to me. It is a kind of liana with large white blossoms, with a milky sap and apple-like fruits. At the Samba River I was shown a path said to have been made by this animal in order to get at its food. The path was fresh and there were plants of the described type nearby. But since there were too many tracks of elephants, hippos, and other large mammals, it was impossible to make out a particular spoor with any amount of certainty.
About 3 months ago I was driving home from Wood. On my way home I saw one of the most fucked up and bizarre things I have ever witnessed. It was probably around 2 a.m. when it happened. I was in the city with a couple of my friends and my girlfriend. We were at the hookah bar, catching up and having a few drinks. The bar closes pretty late and we didn't get out of there till well after midnight. After dropping my friends off at home I brought my girlfriend to her house so she could grab her car. The plan was for her to follow me to my house and she was going to spend the night. She had work in the morning and needed her car so she could leave directly from my house and not have to force me into driving her. I was all for this because, to be frank, I'm usually very lonely at night and I enjoy the company of my beautiful girlfriend. It's not too often I can convince her to sleep over. It's a very nice night, a little on the cold side for July, but crystal clear skies and a perfect thumbnail moon hanging overhead. I live in the back country of Massachusetts. It's basically all woods, farms, and bumpy, pothole-littered roads. Driving these roads at night can be a little unnerving, but I've become used to it and generally enjoy a late-night drive through the country. Pick very related. The drive from my girlfriend's house to my house takes about 15 minutes. Somehow she manages to get in front of my car with hers. It's not a big deal, she knows how to get to my house. After all, we've been together for over a year now, so I think nothing of it. I reached into my shirt pocket, take out my pack of Marlboros and light a cigarette. Shifting into third gear, I accelerate onto a very pretty stretch of road with farm fields on both sides. Paying no attention to the road, I know the route to my house like the back of my hand. I look down to ash my cigarette in the ashtray, and upon looking up there is a deer in the middle of the road. It's a miracle that neither my girlfriend nor I hit it. Deer, fox, raccoons, and other critters are common to these back roads of New England. With my heart racing, I let out a laugh, imaging the damage my crummy '94 Ford Escort would sustain if I hit something like that. After driving down the very scenic farm-laden road, our two-car caravan begins the final leg of the drive to my house. This street, Whitewood Road, is very steep and incredibly windy. A few times I've almost flipped my car because I was careless with my driving. Being on the edge of my seat after almost hitting that deer, I made sure to pay attention. The tail lights of my girlfriend's car ahead of me acted like a marker to follow. I watched them vanish for a second as her car went around a sharp corner, and then to reappear after I had taken the same corner. The road crept through the woods like a snake. At the last bend before the bridge which brings you into a neighborhood, a very secluded one on the outskirts of town, my girlfriend's brake lights went on. She's a really shitty driver, so I didn't think anything of it. As she took the turn, her high beams illuminated a white shape on the outside corner of the road, just outside the tree line where the white breakdown lane line would be if this road had traffic lines. I drove forward, probably at about 10 miles per hour because the turn was sharp and because I wanted to see what this white shape was. I wish I hadn't. It was a man. He was laying in the fetal position. He was covered in dirt, scraped from head to toe, wearing nothing but a pair of white cut-off shorts. No shoes and no shirt. His hair was long, thin and jet black. His body was snow white in color. His skin glowed in the yellow hue of my headlights. I stopped my car next to him. My first impression was that it was a hitchhiker who was hit by a car, or maybe someone had beaten him up and thrown him out their vehicle, stranding him alone. I was an Eagle Scout and know a thing or two about first aid. I figured I could help him, let him use my phone, or even give him a ride. I leaned over into the passenger seat and rolled down the window. The passenger side door was maybe 5 feet away from the man. Unlocked. As I rolled down the window, the man looked up at me. His eyes were as black as night. The pupils were as big as Arias. He didn't blink. He couldn't. He didn't have eyelids. I looked directly into this man's face. He looked crazy, and animalistic. Like the wilderness had turned him into some kind of beast. After about 10 seconds the man began to rise to his feet, putting his hand onto his knobby knees for support. His frail chest rising and falling rapidly. He looked me right in the face the whole time, and when he finally got on his feet he made a move for my door handle. I was frozen with fear and didn't know what to do at first. Once I got my senses I floored it, but the car wouldn't move. I had left it in third gear and my car, being an absolute shitbox, just whined and sputtered and crept forward at about 3 miles per hour. I slipped it back into first gear and took off, all the while keeping my sight fixated on this man. As I drove away his sunken, crazy face turned into a grin. I took out my phone and called my girlfriend. Surely she saw this guy, there's no way I'm imaging this. My girlfriend answered the phone immediately. I told her to pull over and wait for me. She was about 1,000 feet up the road. I pulled up next to her, my window already about halfway down, and asked her if she saw that guy. She literally began screaming and crying and sped off. She called me and apologized for driving away like that. She said she was too freaked out to sit around in the car that close to the man. I told her to go to our friend's house. He lived in the neighborhood, about 10 seconds away from where we were pulled over. She agreed and led the way. We got to his house, locked our doors, met up with each other and held hands. Her hand in mine, we ran into his basement. It's always unlocked. Friends just drop by at his house, it's how it's always been. He was sitting at his computer playing WoW. We told him what happened and he said we have to go back and check this out, that there must be an explanation. So all three of us piled in what we saw. My friend wasn't convinced. He's a see it to believe it kind of guy. We drove down the road where we saw the man. Nothing. We turned around and drove down it again. Nothing. We made a detour, emerging on a side road that leads to the road where we saw this man. We all agreed to make one more pass down the road before calling it a night. Not expecting to see anything. I lit up another cigarette. As I was pulling my lighter from my pocket, I saw him. He was standing against a tree. No, he was standing facing the tree. His arms were crossed in front of his chest. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't moving. He was just there. My girlfriend began screaming at the top of her lungs. I couldn't take it. It was too much. I gunned it. Speeding off down the road, these horrible screams just echoing in my ear. I turned around and told her to shut the fuck up. The screams turned to sobs and sporadic sniffles. My friend, in the front passenger seat, was awestruck. He couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I was so anxious and nervous. I didn't know what to think. That's when she said it. He had a hammer in his hand. I didn't understand what she was saying through the sobs. She repeated it. He had a hammer in his hand. I decided to call the police. I pulled over further up the road and entered 9-1-1 into my phone. It was ringing. What the fuck am I going to say, I thought. The dispatcher picked up. I told him the story through a shaky and cracking voice. The dispatch told me to stay put. That they were going to send a patrol car, and that they wanted us to show him where we saw this man. We obeyed and waited for what seemed like an eternity. Every sound seemed like him. Every movement seemed like it was him. We didn't speak. I just sat there, chain smoking. Just as I lit a cigarette, the officer showed up. I flicked the butt onto the ground and proceeded to show him where we saw this guy. There was nothing to found. After waiting around with the cop for a while, answering his repetitive questions, we left. We decided to go to McDonald's for breakfast. It was around 4:30 a.m. now. We made our trip back down Whitewood RD. We passed the spot where we were pulled over, the spot where I called the cops from. That's when I noticed something. My high beams caught the reflection of an object on the ground. It was a